Now, there were actually two creeks. There's a creek branch, and one of the legs of the creek went up towards where Tesco is now, and the other one went towards where the parish church is. And the town itself was built on a shingle bank. And
Are you talking about a dike being a wall or a ditch?
The dike is the wall, and the ditch is the ditch. And all around was sort of muddy ground. So Moat Brae and the shingle bank formed a sort of defensive peninsula. And the defences were put to the test.
The town,
And it took in the area that is now covered by Greyfriars Church and the castle as well. A burial chamber. So much of the fiery stone was used by him to build up his own capital. And when he died, in 1907, it was reconstructed about 3 times with different layouts. It stopped being a school in 1915, and in 1919 it was bought to become the church and the Episcopal Church of Scotland. This stone arch used to front market posts. You know, we've got a lot of pens and places in the town. We'll talk about some of them as we pass. And Market Post was demolished to make way for Dovecroft, which is the street that comes into the High Street, just about at the Sheriff Court. The cannon, after the war, came off the ship, and they were stored for a long time in the toll booth. And when there was ever a ceremonial need for them, they were wheeled out and they would fire a salute. But there comes a time in a cannon's life where it becomes a dangerous activity. So that's why they're here now. And the Britannia itself made a number of voyages between 1811 and 1816. It got to North America, it got to Rio de Janeiro, and as well as going to Ireland, Liverpool, and various parts of Europe. Which you'll see is Auchengo House, if we pass, is a townhouse. And it was built in the 1770s, probably by MacCulloch of Auchengo. And Auchengo is a farm that's near to Dundrennan. So in these days when travel wasn't as easy as it is today, these were useful things to have. And we'll find that one or two other of the big houses in the High Street were built as townhouses for that purpose as well. So we're going to just walk up to the corner to the sort of grey doors. You might be able to see that knocker as you pass. Have a look at Auchengo Park. And you'll see Riverside Court, which was built about 1880 as a grain warehouse, but in the 1980s was converted into flats.
Can I just ask,
Certainly.
Can you explain what a townhouse is? It's not what I thought, it's just a house built in the town.
Well, it is a house just built in the town, but it's built for a purpose because, and it's a second house, a second residence really. The people who built them had maybe farms, maybe even a mansion. There was one case where the person had a mansion. But this was where you would meet. This was where the town council was, where the people of influence would be from time to time. So it was very handy, since you didn't necessarily want to be riding 20 miles in the dark, just to have somewhere to lay your head. And you might not have been in any condition to go 20 miles in the dark.
Simply most comfort town.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I want to grasp part what it was.
Right. Okay. Right. Let's go. By its defensive walls, there were two gates, One was called the Meikle-Yett, and we'll see where that was, and it's in the South High Street way down there. And the other was the Watergate, which was round about here. It may not be precisely here, but certainly about here. And you can just imagine if you were coming looking for a custom house to pay your dues, and you came up here and looked down the street, what a wonderful prospect it is when you're walking down between these lovely big houses and the toll booth is at the end. Just terrific. And this, where we are now is known as Mackenzie's Steps today, and that was after Mr. Mackenzie, who was a ship's caulker, and he worked on the boats down there. Wanted to get to and towards the end of its life, the ferry was really quite a substantial boat, and it could carry 4 horses and carts. There's a model of it in the museum, if you want to see what it looks like. And it was typical of quite a number of ferries in Scotland of the same sort. And it was hauled across by rope. So a lot of people thought it was messy and could be very inconvenient and really quite unreliable. Most of them said that the mail very often would be substantial.
Very nice. The webs.
There's a problem with old Kirkcudbright, and that's the number of cars that get parked, because that's definitely spoiled the view at ground level. So you can always lift your eye, see the view further up. I'm looking at the sort of creamy yellow painted buildings, and that's number 3 and number 5. And these houses for 30 years in the last century now, the 20th century, were occupied by an artist called David Sassoon. And David Sassoon was a cousin of Siegfried Sassoon, that everybody's heard of, the war poet. And he's got a very distinctive, or he had a very distinctive style in oils and watercolours, quite blocky in a way. And he was really quite comfortably off, and he had no pressing need to sell his works. So really until he died, there wasn't much in public hands. But that changed after his death, and there's quite a few of them to be seen now. I'm looking now at Broughton House. And Broughton House was built in 1734. And it was acquired by Murray of Broughton. And Murray of Broughton also has Kelly Estate. Kelly House is like Kelly Hotel, near Gatehouse. And he was a very grand person, so he wasn't visited at any time. He was built by really grand houses, and that's when the frontage went on after he bought it. And that's sort of late 18th, early 19th century. By 1878, that was bought Boys Boarding School, and then in 1900 it was bought by Edward Horner. By that time he was successful. He owned quite a bit of property around the town, and this was going to be him showing that he really made it. So it wasn't good enough the way it was, and he got an architect to design the side additions to hold his gallery in the studio. Just imagine what it would be like if you lived in a house on this street and you didn't have any running water, and you had to carry your water in a bucket from somewhere, and there was no town water supply. Just how horrible that would be. Well, the town is justifiably proud of the fact that in 1863 it established a town water supply, and it led the water in wooden pipes from Angel Hill, which is where St Cuthbert's churchyard is away up the hill in that direction, down to certain outlets in the town. And these outlets were spouts, in Scots known as spoots. And this red door here is the entrance to Spoot Close, and Spoot Close actually had a spout in it. So if you lived in Spoot Close, it'd be, you're on, as you say, on Lord Collins. You don't have to carry your water very far. On Kent. Now, obviously they're very proud of leading the water supply in, but nobody actually talks about what they did about disposing of the waste in the end. There's a veil has been drawn over that. The building with the green window frames is number 44, and the close is Greengate Close. And that was occupied and owned, well, it was owned from 1915 by Jessie M. King, and her husband was also an artist, E.A. Taylor. And they had a host of artist friends, and they encouraged them to come and live and work in the close, so it was a bit of a money spinner. In fact, one of them, I don't know if anybody listens to Women's Hour. Yes, Vera Home. That's right. Well, she was there for a while. I just heard a fraction of it yesterday, and I haven't heard any more. But Vera Home was a cross-dresser. She answered to the name of Jack. I think she scandalised the town. She had a lot of amorous affairs. So anyway, that's her claim to fame. And if you listen to Women's Hour, they're serialising her diaries at the moment. So very topical. She designed the waitresses' uniforms. This was the gable end to the street. Now this used to be very common in Scottish towns. I see someone got St Andrews. St Andrews. St Andrews is a water building like this. It was a Flemish influence. But as time went by, it was looked on as very old-fashioned, and most of them were demolished. This was the Tollbooth Gallery at one time, sort of in the 40s and 50s. Artist craftsman, Alice Dallas. Supposed to have been named after Jean Corby, and she was the only person who dared to speak out in favour of Elspeth McEwen of Dalry. Elspeth McEwen of Dalry was put on trial here for witchcraft, and she was found guilty, and she was the last person, certainly here, and one of the last people in Scotland to have been strangled at the stake and burned, and that's 1698. So that's Jean Corby, she spoke up for it. We'll just go over here. Now, in 1590, a man called Herbert Gladstone was given the job of rebuilding the gate. And he had to make it as high as he could actually touch the bottom of the beam across while sitting on his grey horse. And the width was to be just the width as was. For doing that, he got £50. Now, after the Pentland Rising in the 60s, the heads of several prominent covenanters adorned the gate as a warning to others. So it's a good public asset. Now, by the late 18th century, the gate was probably getting in the way of commerce. So the town council decided to be demolished to encourage the building of decent houses in this part of the town. And some of the stone was actually used to build this building, but 2 stones which mark the gate posts, the gate pivots, and 2 globular ornamental stones were taken, and they're part of the gateway cemetery.